The villagers said the forest spoke only to those who deserved it, which made it worse. If it had whispered to everyone, the voices might have drowned themselves, a chorus fading into wind. But the forest chose. It listened. It remembered. And when it spoke, it used your name like a blade. Zulfikar learned this as a child, long before he wore iron or carried a sword. He and his brother Rahim had run beneath old branches, their laughter bouncing between trunks like thrown stones. Rahim found the tree first, an oak split long ago by lightning, its heart charred, its bark bulging into a face that looked almost human if you stared too long. "Make a wish," Rahim said. He pressed 2 fingers to the black seam. A spark popped, as if the tree were full of trapped stars, and he yanked his hand away with a curse. Zulfikar did not touch it. He had seen their mother kneel in the doorway that morning, whispering prayers to a god who loved order and hated bargains. He had seen the worry in her hands as she tied Rahim's scarf. Something in the split oak felt like a bargain. That night Rahim slipped from bed and never returned. They found his scarf snagged on a bramble near the oak, dark with something that had dried stiff. Zulfikar's father struck him for not waking when Rahim left. Zulfikar did not cry. He deserved the pain the way he deserved the whispers that came in dreams, the ones that said, "I remember you." He left the village before his beard had the chance to fill in, took coin for guarding caravans and later for worse things. Once, a man who wore a ring heavy with another family's crest paid him to burn a granary. Zulfikar lit the thatch and held his breath while the mice screamed in the walls. He learned to keep his face blank when flames caught. He grew strong in the silence you make after the worst act is done. Years passed and his father died. His mother stopped writing. Zulfikar never returned. The forest did not need him to. It could call across distance as easily as across a field. When the summons finally came, it felt less like a voice and more like gravity. He dreamed Rahim's scarf was a path, red and tugging, and woke with the taste of ash in his mouth. He had been paid to escort a trader through the hinterlands south of his village. The path would take him near the tree. He told himself chance ran that road too. He told himself he would not listen for whispers, but the forest remembers. It does not know chance. On the 4th night of travel, they camped within sight of the first dark rise of the forest. The trader, a plump man with soft boots and a soft laugh, fell asleep with a slice of cheese still in his hand. Zulfikar stoked the fire and watched the tree line. A wind trickled from the leaves and felt colder than it should. He was cleaning his blade with a rag when he felt eyes on him. Not eyes, attention. The same pressure as a crowd holding its breath. "Zulfikar," the forest said. He did not move. The trader snored. The sparks from the fire rose like little prayers and died without answers. The whisper came again, closer. "Zulfikar." He stood, the sword in his hand becoming an anchor. He did not turn toward the trees. He looked at the sleeping man, the crude outline of the cart, the harness propped against a wheel. Ordinary things. He waited for the voice to dissolve into wind, the way most superstitions dissolve when you frown at them. It did not. "There you are," it breathed, very pleased. The leaves touched each other in a slow ripple, like fingers closing. Zulfikar gripped the hilt so hard his knuckles ached. He could run. He could wake the trader and drag him toward dawn. But the path cut close to the forest tomorrow. If the forest wanted him, it would get him. Better to go to the whisper like a man walking into a stream to see its depth, than to be pulled under with surprise. He sheathed his sword and walked toward the edge of the trees. Between trunks, mist hung in drapes, and the dark was thicker than night should be. He touched the first tree by habit, the way a man touches a doorframe before ducking inside. The bark was warm. "Where is he?" Zulfikar asked. He had not planned to say it, and hearing his own voice startled him. He could count the times he'd spoken Rahim's name in the last 10 years on one hand. He didn't know whether he wanted an answer. The leaves settled. The pressure eased, then pressed again like a tide. "Under," the forest said. "Between." Where the roots eat light, give him back. It was a foolish sentence. The forest could not give back. It only took and then waited for you to notice. Come, it whispered. Bring a memory. He did not step farther. If he went now, he might never leave. If he left now, the road would carry him away, and he would never return. Both truths hurt in the same place. He backed away, breath slow, boots careful. At the fire, he sat and forced his body to act as if nothing had happened. He covered the sleeping trader with a blanket. He laid his sword across his knees like a sleeping dog. He told himself he would walk around the forest in the morning. The morning came and the cartwheel split on a stone. The trader wailed. Zulfikar tried to bind the wheel with rawhide and rope. The rope snapped. A replacement spoke splintered in his hands. When he bent to lift the axle, something in the earth shifted, and the cart lurched out of his grip like a living thing trying to crawl. By noon, Zulfikar stopped pretending. "Leave the cart," he said. "The forest will not let us pass the road unless we pass inside it." The trader's eyes went shiny. "Is it haunted?" Zulfikar did not waste time on the word. Haunted implies a story, and stories want to hold your hand. This was not a story. "Take what you can carry," he said. He took his sword, his water skin, a coil of line, a lamp with oil, and a pouch of salt. In his side bag he hid a little thing wrapped in cloth, a carved animal with ears rubbed thin, Rahim's whistle. He had told himself he would not bring it. He had brought it anyway. They entered the forest on a path that had no footprints and looked as though it had been waiting for theirs. The trees were taller than Zulfikar remembered. The air tasted like metal and rain. Birds made small noises, and then thought better of it. By twilight they found a clearing where an old altar slouched under moss. It looked Roman, or the ghost of something Roman. The lines of it practical and severe, as if it were a tool, not a place. Zulfikar brushed lichen from its top, and the stone hissed. He drew his hand back. "What is it?" the trader asked. "A table," Zulfikar said. "For cutting a deal." "Oh-ho," the trader said, trying to laugh. "You should like that." Zulfikar did not smile. He lit his lamp and set it on the altar. The flame burned low and blue. The forest leaned closer to watch. They ate cold bread and dried figs. The trader dozed, mumbling about profit even in sleep. Zulfikar sat with his back to the altar and his sword across his thighs. The lamp flame climbed and sank, as if someone were breathing on it. Now and then a shape moved between trees, and he made his eyes heavy until the shape slipped out of the corner of his vision. "Zulfikar," the forest whispered again. He forced himself to answer. "I'm here." The fog thickened. A figure walked out of it with the ritual slowness of someone who wants to be sure you see them. Cloak, bare feet, hands as pale as stones at a river's bottom. A woman's face. Old, but not in the way of years alone. Old the way leather gets old, with purpose. "Do you speak for it?" Zulfikar asked. She cocked her head. "I speak as it. How else would you hear? What do you want?" His voice sounded hard and flat. "What you brought," she said, and smiled. There was no warmth in it. She might have been proud of a harvest. He set his hand on the bag where Rahim's whistle lay, feeling the small shape through cloth. "And what do I receive?" The smile vanished. "Asking for the price before naming the goods. Your father taught you that. He was smart about small things. He died in a chair that smelled like sweat and salt. He thought of your mother when he could no longer hold himself, and of you when he could no longer swallow." Zulfikar did not flinch. He had already imagined worse. "Do not steal from my past," he said. "Name the trade." Her eyes moved to the sword across his legs. "How you bring iron. Iron is rude. But we will forgive rudeness if you listen." "I'm listening. You want a brother. You want an answer. You want to walk in a world where little boys do not leave through doors made of bark." She stepped closer. He could smell wet earth on her. "We cannot rewrite the river's course. But we can give you a bridge across where you drowned." "You took him," Zulfikar said. You took Rahim. Where is he? She looked at the lamp. The flame leaned toward her like a dog toward its owner. He went down, and down is crowded. We liked his fear. It tasted clean. She glanced back at Zulfikar. Yours tasted like ash. If I give you the whistle, he said quietly, will you let me see him? If you give us the memory it holds, she corrected. Be neat with words. Memory is more than wood. What if I keep it and leave? Her smile returned, small and pleased. Then a boy will be taken in a village 3 valleys away before winter. Or a mother will forget her child's name on a Wednesday. The world does not give change without rounding. He remembered mice screaming in a granary's walls. He and the old woman were both accountants of pain. Theirs differed only in scale. He unwrapped the whistle and held it. It was carved as a fox, with a small notch where Rahim had bitten the tail while thinking. Zulfikar raised it to his lips and did not play it. He could not stand to hear. Tell me the terms, he said. You lay your memory here, she said, patting the altar. We drink it. In exchange, you will walk the routes. If you find him and your voice is the last voice he hears, he will rise. It sounds simple. It is not a labyrinth because it is hard to draw a map, she said. It is a labyrinth because you will want to stay. Why would I want to stay? Because the roots feed on love and make a sweetness you can live inside. Men who bite that fruit grow thin and happy and forget. They become trees with faces. She placed her palm on the nearest trunk. A faint impression in the bark could almost be read as a mouth. It looked like someone who had lost an argument and chosen not to speak again. How many have you taken? All the right number, she said, as if that ended things. Zulfikar laid the whistle on the stone. He expected the forest to snatch it, but the woman only looked at him. We need your hand. He touched the whistle. Memory opened like a bruise, Rahim's breath on his ear, the warm stink of goats, the smooth promise of a borrowed secret. If you tell, I'll never speak to you again, Rahim said, laughing. No, not really, but don't tell. A hand tugging his sleeve. A face turned to him in trust. He could feel the small, hard shape of the whistle where it always lived in Rahim's pocket. He had felt it that morning, pressed against his hip where Rahim leaned while they watched their father smoke inside the doorway. The altar drank. The whistle dissolved in flakes, then in slow grey smoke. It stung Zulfikar's eyes. When he blinked, the whistle was gone, and the old woman's eyes were very bright. Say his name, she said. Rahim. The roots beneath the altar shifted and opened like a mouth. Zulfikar tied his line around the altar and his waist. The old woman laughed softly. Will you pull yourself up like a bucket if your heart spills out? It will be something to hold against falling, he said. He took the lamp and let the flame lean away from the hole, as if the darkness inside sucked air. He climbed. The roots were slick and warm, as if a beast slept and he was moving through its wool. Sap bled thick as honey in places and smelled faintly of iron. The light from the lamp licked the curved walls, making veins of rot and life flicker and trade places. Somewhere water dripped with the patience of old things. The first chamber came without warning. The roots widened into a room. In the center stood a table like the one above, but made of muscle and bone, not stone and pulsing. Zulfikar set the lamp down and touched it. It was not warm exactly, it was only not cold, and the difference made his hand ache. Zulfikar, a voice said, but it was wrong. It wore Rahim's shape like a shirt put on backward. The pitch was higher than adult, lower than child. He turned, sword ready. A boy stepped from behind a curtain of roots. He looked 11. His hair hung in his eyes. He smiled, a quick, delighted smile, and Zulfikar's ribs tightened with the urge to believe. Brother, the boy said. What did I give you for your 6th name day? Zulfikar asked. The boy's smile did not falter. The whistle, he said. What was the first thing you played? The boy whisper laughed. We made the goat kick the bucket. Zulfikar's mouth went dry. It was true. It was true, and it was enough. It had to be enough. He took a step forward, and the boy's eyes went black at the edges, like paper tipping into a fire. Come, the boy said softly. Eat. You've fallen so far. You must be hungry. Zulfikar looked at the table. It pulsed faster, eager. He raised the lamp close and saw that the plates set on it were not plates. They were little rounds of bark, each cupping a flower of white fungus, like the fold of an ear turned inside out. The smell was sweet, the sweetness of rot in late summer that makes men think of fruit. No, he said. The boy clapped his hands. They echoed like leaves slapping a window. You're no fun. You are not my brother. Of course not, the boy said, as if they were both adults now and could be honest at last. His mouth thinned. But your brother is here. He went down. You must go down. That is how you meet. Do you see him? Zulfikar asked. I see everyone, the boy said. The roots have 1,000 eyes. You only have 2, and both point the same way. It's a pity. Zulfikar lifted his lamp and turned to the far side of the chamber. The roots drew back like skirts. A stair cut itself into the earth. Very neat. He descended. Rooms bloomed and closed. In one, a river of beetles crossed his path. Their backs shone like polished stones. They hissed when his light touched them. In another, a wall twitched and resolved into thousands of sleeping moths, which woke and beat their wings in a slow, soundless storm when he breathed. He lost count of turns. He lost count of breaths. Time became a shape that did not fit through these rooms. At last he came to a place where the roots were stone again. A hall lay open and wide as a church nave, pillars braided with veins. At the far end stood an effigy, carved of black wood, a man kneeling, his head bent, his hands open as if waiting for rain. It took him a moment to understand that the effigy's mouth was a hollow tunnel. When he stepped close, breath breathed out of it. Not his breath, someone else's. Very slow. Rahim, he said, but the effigy did not answer. He set his palm against the hollow and something touched back from the other side of the wood. 3 slow taps. Zulfikar tapped twice. Tap, tap. Silence. Then, very faintly, a tune, the way you might hum if you were trying not to convince yourself you were singing. The first notes of the whistle song. Zulfikar choked. He pressed his ear to the effigy's mouth. Rahim, he whispered. The wood shivered. A whisper rose from inside, not like wind, not like leaves, like a voice through teeth. You took your time. Zulfikar shut his eyes. He felt 12, and then 20, and then 300. I didn't know where to go. You always did, Rahim said, and then he sighed, and with the sigh Zulfikar felt the hall shift as if gravity had turned to look at them. Chapter 4. The Cost of a Name. Are you trapped? Zulfikar asked. Can I break this? Try, Rahim said, and laughed like a man with a fever who is determined to be polite. Zulfikar drew his sword and struck. The blade rang. The effigy drank the blow as if it were water. Sap bled from the cut, thick and dark, and smelled like old smoke. Zulfikar struck again, and a third time, and the effigy's head tilted very slightly, like a person with a kink in his neck trying to make it better. It will not crack, Rahim said. He sounded as though he were leaning close to Zulfikar's cheek and as far as the sky. What holds you? Remember when the new priest came and said God was not a thing you could hold in your mouth? You were angry and said he was wrong, because you'd seen Father mutter a prayer that changed Abaya's mind. You believed names were handles. You were right. Rahim's breath shivered in the wood. I am held by names. The forest has 1,000. Men gave them freely. How do I purchase one? Zulfikar asked. He did not notice the word until after he said it. The forest's voice had taught him a lexicon of trade. You cannot buy, Rahim said gently. You must surrender. Zulfikar leaned his head back. He could follow that path. He had trained himself in it. Once you accept that the world balances accounts, giving becomes a way to control loss. He lifted the lamp and looked beyond the effigy. The hall did not end. It turned and turned like an intestine. If he set his shoulder to wandering, he would never find what he wanted. He would simply become a man who had learned to love wrong turns. What surrender, do you ask? He said at last. Your cleansed memory. Rahim's voice had changed. It had grown calmer. It sounded like water under ice. Not your happiest, your cleanest. Clean how? Where nothing was owed, Rahim said. A memory before your life became a book of accounts. Zulfikar closed his eyes. The day unfolded, a sky the color of milk, their mother's hand slapping dough, a fly trapped in a spider's corner and freed by a breeze, the smell of their father's tobacco not yet rotten with worry. He and Rahim ran along the river, not racing, just matching their steps so their footfalls sounded like one person's. They stopped to watch a frog that had been hurt. How, they did not know. And the frog sat and then breathed slower, and then did not. Rahim cried without sound and touched the frog's head with one finger, and then they buried it with a spoon they used for everything. Zulfikar remembered thinking, this is the first thing that will not get better. And then the sun came out, from behind a cloud, and it seemed to him both true that improvement would stop and true that light existed anyway. He had felt no debt in that moment. He had felt no price. He had stood up and brushed dirt from his knees and laughed because his hands looked clean and were not. He told this memory to the wood. Something in the hall sighed. The effigy's mouth softened. The air pressed less. Zulfikar took a breath that was not forced through a needle's eye. You are lighter, Rahim said. He sounded very tired. It is not enough. What else? Your oath, Rahim said. The one you made after the granary. You promised you would never again use fire for money. You kept it. Break it here, give it to them. They like words that change shape. Zulfikar closed his eyes. He tasted smoke. He tasted the hands he had washed in river water after lighting the thatch. The oath rose in him, small and iron. He let it go. He felt it leave like a cough. The hall listened, very enthusiastic. Still the effort. Zulfikar put his forehead against the wood. Tell me the last thing you heard, he said. Before you went under. Rahim's breath scraped. You told me not to go. I went. That is not a thing I said, Zulfikar whispered, but he knew it was. The lie you tell yourself about warnings is that you speak them on time. Give me something of yours, Rahim said. Not memory, body. Zulfikar stepped back, startled. What on earth would help you if I cut off a finger? On earth, nothing, Rahim said. Under earth, everything. Cut your palm. The wood needs blood to soften. Zulfikar drew his knife before caution could grow words. He slit his left palm and pressed it against the effigy's mouth. Heat ran through the wood. The hall trembled with a pleasure so greedy he wanted to retch. He left his hand there until his knees shook. He smelled his own sweat, bright with iron. The effigy gave. Wood sloughed from its mouth as if it were shedding old skin. A gap opened. Zulfikar pushed his hand into dark and found another hand. It was small, smaller than it should have been. The fingers gripped his wrist, and the grip was both familiar and wrong, the way a nightmare kisses you using your lover's face. Hold, Rahim said. Zulfikar held. Pulling Rahim through was like hauling a net through weeds. The woods did not want to release what it had made part of itself. Roots caught at Zulfikar's boots. Twigs threaded his hair. Something cold ran down his spine. Not as water, but as if the forest had behind his back laid a finger to mark him for later. Rahim fell out of the effigy mouth with a wet sound. He lay on the floor, coughing earth and threads of white fungus. His skin shone with a varnish of sap. His eyes, when he opened them, were the grey of smoke that has forgotten its fire. Zulfikar knelt. He touched Rahim's face and took his hand away quickly. The skin was not wrong. It was simply not expected. It felt like working leather rather than a living cheek. "Can you stand?" Zulfikar asked. Rahim tried. He made a noise that would have embarrassed him when he was young. Zulfikar lifted him and leaned him against a pillar. He opened his water skin, tipped water into Rahim's mouth, and watched it vanish into him like patience. "How long?" Rahim asked when he had breath enough to speak. "Years," Zulfikar said. "We are old enough to have learned to forgive time for its tricks." Rahim smiled, a thin, tired line that made him look almost precise. "You grew a beard," he said. "So did you," Zulfikar said, and Rahim laughed once, a sound that admitted defeat while asking for more rope. The hall stirred. The roots flexed like a crowd about to rise from seats. "Can you walk?" Zulfikar asked. Rahim nodded. They moved together, slow. The path back was not the path down. The rooms had changed their minds. In one, faces bulged from the walls like knots in wood, and whispered advice with voices too slow to finish a sentence. In another, a long table lay set with plates of ashes shaped like meat. The ashes curled when they passed, as if shy. In a third, a child's toy sat in a puddle, a little wooden horse with a wheel missing. Rahim bent and picked it up without thinking. The puddle slurped and reached. Zulfikar jerked him back. The toy fell and the water made a hurt sound. Rahim's eyes filled with an old sadness that had learned patience and lost everything else. "This way," Zulfikar said, though he did not know. He chose turns by spite. If the forest leaned left, he went right. If it held a room up for inspection, he looked away. They reached at last a chamber that smelled like rain rather than graves. The table of muscle had gone slack. Their rope hung from a hole above, coiled like a sleeping grey snake. "Up," Zulfikar said. Rahim squinted. "My arms, I'll pull," Zulfikar said. "I tied the other end to the altar, and will haul you like a fisherman if I must." Rahim grinned for the first time. It was a quick flash, and it made him look like the boy who had stolen their mother's ring to test how it would taste if scavenger birds liked gold. He put his foot in the loop Zulfikar made and let the rope bite his waist. Zulfikar pulled. His palm screamed. He gritted his teeth and remembered striking the granary door with his shoulder until it broke and the fire exhaled. He remembered the weight of that breath. He used it, ugly as it was, as leverage. Hands reached down, not Zulfikar's, thin, pale hands that belonged to no one he could see. They took Rahim under the arms and lifted. Zulfikar snarled before he could stop himself. The hands stroked Rahim's neck as if comforting him, and then vanished. Rahim slumped to the ground above. Zulfikar climbed last. The rope burned. When his head cleared the hole, the smell of the forest's air hit him like a lie told beautifully. Green, wet, full of the idea of clean. The old woman sat on the altar, legs swinging like a girl. She watched them with the serene surprise of a cat discovering the mouse is also a knife. "Well," she said, "you have an admirable back." Zulfikar stood, panting. He drew his sword. "Put it away," she said. "You cannot cut the feeling you have now. That is the trap. What price remains?" Zulfikar asked. She spread her hands. "Price? Dear heart, you already paid." Rahim looked at Zulfikar, puzzled. "He did?" His voice sounded closer to human now. The root's accent had thinned. The old woman's eyes narrowed with pleasure. "You gave your clean memory and your oath and your blood. You forgot something else on the stair. We took it kindly. As a friend accepts a gift you pretend you do not mean to give." "What?" Zulfikar asked. He checked his body for missing weights. Fingers present, ears present, heart flailing but accounted for. Your fear of doing it again, she said, and smiled as if she had left him an inheritance. Zulfikar stared at her. Of going down. Of opening doors that should not be opened, she said. Of striking the match. Your fear kept you from the granary after that night. It made you careful in the small ways you could be careful, in a life that did not allow much care. It is gone. You can strike any fire now. You will not tremble. He waited for panic, but none came. He felt a hole where a bridle had been. He imagined matches as tools, not as teeth. He looked at the old woman and understood the most terrible thing. She had not lied. Why? He asked softly. She tilted her head. Because balance is an art. You have lifted something out of us. If we do not burden you, you will run too fast and the world will fall from your pockets. Now you will burn things. I won't, he said, but it sounded young. You will, she said, and hopped from the altar. You will not hesitate, and sometimes hesitation is all that saves a field. Take your brother and go. Or stay, I am not a jailer. I am a gardener. Zulfikar took Rahim's elbow. We are leaving. The old woman stepped aside. As they passed, she touched Rahim's cheek with one finger. We will see you again, she said. Rahim did not answer. His eyes were fixed on something Zulfikar could not see. They walked until the trees thinned and fields opened, like a long-held breath. The road to the village lay dusty and innocent. Children played near a well, and a dog chased a chicken and then apologized with a bow. Zulfikar stopped. He had imagined this moment for years, but he had not imagined that the world would dare to remain itself. Rahim leaned on him and laughed under his breath. How are we going to explain? We won't, Zulfikar said. We will arrive and the village will do the explaining. He paused. Do you want to go home? Rahim looked toward the cluster of houses. He rubbed his wrists as if remembering rope. I want to lie down in our mother's kitchen and listen to her sing to the knife while she cuts onions, he said. And I want to run the other way until the forest is a line. And I want to burn it. Zulfikar said nothing. They reached the first house. An old man looked up, squinted, and then frowned at Zulfikar's beard and Rahim's thin face, and the way they leaned like men who would topple if a thought hit them too fast. The old man grunted and went inside. His indifference steadied Zulfikar more than any embrace could have. Their mother's door was open. She sat at the table, mending. She had become fine with care, like a good shawl. When she looked up and saw Rahim, she pressed her hand to her chest. Zulfikar stepped forward, ready to hold her if she fainted. She did not. She made a sound that was neither laugh nor cry, and crossed the floor with surprising speed. She took Rahim's face in both hands and kissed his cheek once hard, as if laying claim. My boy, she said. He fell against her shoulder. Zulfikar looked away. He felt as if someone were carefully removing him from a painting in which he had been an important figure. Their mother reached out her free hand and found his. She held it without speaking. He stood still and let the warmth move into him like light into something carved. Sit, she said at last, both of you. The kettle is foolish today. It keeps forgetting to boil. She turned to the stove and set 2 cups and then a third. When she put one in front of Zulfikar, she touched his wrist and frowned at the bandage there. What did you do to